Hello, welcome to Easy Stories in English. I'm Ariel Goodbody, and today we're just going to have a nice relaxed chat and a cup of tea, and specifically we're talking about drugs. No, I'm joking. We're talking about medication, although the difference is not so big. And yes, there is building work going on outside. They are fixing the fence in our garden. I just want to record this video now, sorry. And yes, there is a hole in my door, but it's rude to ask. So, let's talk about the pills I'm on. This is my pill box. As you can see, it's got all the days of the week. Let's see what I take. So most of it is actually just supplements. So supplements are like vitamins, for example. So I take 2 of these, which are vitamin D tablets. Vitamin D you usually get from the sun, but the sun doesn't shine very much in the UK, so it's good to take vitamin D. I take 2 because I heard that you can't absorb a lot of vitamin D from pills, like your body can't take it in so well. So I take 2 just to be safe. I also take magnesium. I've heard magnesium helps with lots of things. It helps with sleep and loads of things. Apparently, a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. Their body doesn't have enough magnesium. And apparently magnesium is very important for people who are autistic or ADHD. And I am both of those things. And then I take this PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis. PrEP is a really fantastic medication. You can take it every day or you can take it during specific periods. And basically what it does is it massively reduces the risk of you getting HIV. Obviously, HIV is quite serious because if it's not treated, it can develop into AIDS. And once you have HIV, you can't really cure it. We haven't really found a cure so far. So PrEP is preventative, you take it, and then even if you have sex with someone who has HIV and has a high viral load, they have a high amount of the virus in their body, you probably won't get it. There's a very, very small chance that you will. Actually, it's great because you can even use it. Let's say you have sex with someone and you think you might be infected, you can take a strong dose of PrEP after that, and actually it can still hopefully prevent you from getting it. And I take that because I'm a gay man, and yeah. And then I take this is my newest one. This lovely little pink and white pill is Elvanse, 30 milligrams. Elvanse is an ADHD medication. Let me put these pills away and I'll tell you all about ADHD. ADHD is an acronym that means Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. There are 3 types of ADHD. There is inattentive ADHD, hyperactive ADHD, and combined. So hyperactive ADHD is the stereotype most people have. It's, you think of a child running around a classroom, they can't concentrate, they have loads of energy, they're crazy, they're interrupting people, they're doing stuff all the time. Inattentive ADHD is a similar idea. It's like your thoughts are running very fast, but instead of putting that energy out into the world, it's all staying inside. So someone with inattentive ADHD might just sort of stare into the distance and be daydreaming all the time. So you might think they're paying attention, but actually they're completely lost in their own world. Last year, I was diagnosed with combined ADHD, which means I show traits. I have parts of both inattentive and hyperactive ADHD, which I kind of knew already, like I've known I'm autistic and have ADHD for a long time. I didn't have an official diagnosis, but I knew so many people who, are autistic and ADHD who said, yes, I have this same experience. I did so much research. I read scientific articles and I watched videos from professors of psychology and psychiatry. So I was really, really quite sure it was the case, but I decided to get a private ADHD diagnosis because I wanted to try medication. And I have to say, this medication has made a huge difference. Elvanse is quite a new medication, actually, for ADHD. It was invented in 2012. Now, the kind of two main medications that people think of for ADHD are Adderall and Ritalin. And then in some countries, there's also Concerta and some other ones. They sometimes have different names. But Elvanse is basically an improved form of Ritalin, I believe. Basically, with these other drugs, I think with Ritalin, you have to take it several times a day because it gives you a short burst of effectiveness. But Elvanse, or Vyvanse, as it's known in some countries, it's quite a complex drug. Your body breaks it down and then it works gradually over the day. So it has kind of a smooth effect instead of a burst. So what do these drugs actually do? Well, they help you focus, they help you start tasks, and they help you be less impulsive, think more carefully before just doing something. At least these are the effects I've experienced. And also it's made me a lot less anxious. Before I started on this medication, I kind of knew I was anxious, but I thought of it more like, oh, well, I just think a lot. I'm an overthinker. But then I tried this medication and I realized, oh, I was kind of just anxious. Like when I traveled, I would plan everything in loads of detail and write out a document like exactly where I was going to go. But I would still get really stressed and be like, oh my God, what do I do now? I need to get water. I need to get food. I need to go here. It was a lot of, it was a lot to deal with. Last week, however, I went to Hamburg on holiday and I was really relaxed for the traveling. Yeah, going to the airport, even though it was the first time I had traveled abroad, the first time I had flown since COVID, I felt really relaxed and it was fantastic. And with my work, this medication has helped so much. I enjoy my work, but before it was often very hard to be consistent. And I still work in a different way to a lot of people. I tend to do, lots of work in a short time and then have a long break. And sometimes I'll have a day or two in the week where I just don't work. But then I do loads of work the next day, for example. But with this, it's just much easier to kind of get started. I can get right out of bed in the morning with energy and really be organized, and I don't forget things as much. And there are things that I really struggled to do before, mainly chores. So things like washing up, cleaning the bathroom, doing the laundry. I would know, okay, I need to do this. I need to go do this now. But it was just starting the activity was really hard. It was like there was a block. And with this medication, it's way easier than before. Within the ADHD community, people talk about needing pills and skills. So, you can't just take this medication and suddenly your life will become better, right? You need to, have other skills like making lists and having routines and really importantly, self-care. So, even before I started this medication, I wrote a journal every day. I wrote in my diary every day about my feelings and how things went. I made sure to, get to bed early, read books to kind of help me relax, do lots of exercise. That's really important when you have ADHD, to do a lot of exercise to kind of help you get rid of all that extra energy you have. So this really just complements what I was already doing. It does make things a lot more easy and a lot more stable. But I can honestly say that yes, I could live without this medication. It would be harder, but I could do it because I was doing it before. My main issue before was I would get into like a good period where I was doing lots of things and I was, taking on new jobs, new creative work, working with people, and I would get so excited and like, yeah, I want to do everything. I'll do this. And I wouldn't look after myself properly and rest properly. And then suddenly I would crash. I would hit a brick wall and lose all my energy and everything would fall apart and I wouldn't reply to emails for weeks. It could get really bad. But I feel like with this medication, I'm still doing lots of stuff, but I'm breaking before I hit the wall, right? I'm able to kind of keep myself in control and practice that self-care a bit better than before. Of course, there are always side effects with medication. With this particular medication, the main effect, I would say, the main side effect is appetite suppression. So it makes you less hungry because outside of ADHD, it's actually also used to treat binge eating disorder. So binge eating is when people eat loads of food in one time. And some people do it as like an emotional thing, right? Like an addiction kind of thing. This has been strange because, before I did intermittent fasting where you only eat for a certain period of the day. And I really liked not eating in the morning because I could get lots done and then eat later. But with this medication, I really have to eat in the morning, quite early in the morning, within a few hours of taking the medication. Otherwise, I feel really tired. I feel cranky. Cranky is when your emotions are bad and you're frustrated. I struggle to do anything and it can get really bad. And if I don't eat in the morning, it becomes harder to eat later. So last week, like I said, I was in Hamburg and I had this problem where because I was staying in a hotel, I didn't want to pay for breakfast in the hotel because it was expensive. There weren't any shops really close to the hotel. So, I had maybe some snacks like some nuts and a banana in the morning, but I didn't have a lot of, proper food to eat in the morning. So on some days I didn't eat early enough and then I got really tired and then it was so hard to actually go out and eat. And I had this one day where I was walking around trying to find a restaurant for lunch for like an hour or something. I was like, I don't want that food. I don't want that food. It was like the idea of all food repulsed me. Like it made me feel sick. Like I don't want pizza. I don't want burgers. I don't want that. Finally, I did eat at an Italian restaurant and it was good. But sometimes I do feel a bit like I'm forcing myself to eat. Like sometimes I sit there with my breakfast and a book and it takes me like 30 or 40 minutes to eat. So I just have to read while I wait for my stomach to kind of let the food in. The other main side effect has been dry mouth. And obviously this is a bit of a problem because I'm a podcaster. And if you record something with a dry mouth, you get these mouth sounds like horrible noises, right? And obviously when I record the podcasts and edit them, I can hear all these noises and I get frustrated because I want to be professional and I want my work to sound good. Obviously I can hydrate as much as possible. I drink, on the days when I record, I drink like 2 whole bottles of water. I steam my throat, which is when you get like a cup of tea and I put a funnel on it, like a filter, and I suck up the steam to kind of hydrate my throat. I do all of that. It still is quite dry. It's a bit annoying, but I can live with it. And if it's a real problem for recording, I can always take a day off the medication, or a medication vacation, as some people like to call it, and just record on that day. So yeah. One of the really unexpected effects has been it's made my emotions a bit more raw, like a bit more direct and unfiltered. I think before, a lot of people who are autistic and ADHD and gay, let's say, get bullied in school. And I got bullied in school quite a lot. So I really learned to hide my emotions. You know, I was a very emotional child. I had all the feelings and I cried a lot. But at a certain point, I really learned to hide my feelings. And so if something happened to me in the moment that made me sad, I would just, hide it then and then feel the emotions later, and it might be kind of spread out, and I would have this general bad feeling over a long time. But since I've taken this medication, I feel like I've just felt my emotions really like there. So there have been times when something made me sad and like I just went to my room and I cried so much. But it was really good because it helped me just work through these feelings. And it's really hard to know like why it does that, because it's not really something that officially I think the drug is supposed to do. My understanding of like the chemistry of all of this is if you have ADHD, you usually have a deficit, a lack in certain receptors in your brain. So receptors are like God, I really don't understand this very well. I think receptors are the things that like they take in proteins and chemicals. Anyway, you've probably heard of dopamine, right? Dopamine is a hormone that, we get it when we feel rewarded for something. It gives us motivation. And then there's another one, I think, called norepinephrine. And these are both related to motivation. And my understanding is if you have ADHD, you have a deficit in one of these. And so this kind of medication basically helps with that deficit. Now, some people actually take these ADHD meds when they don't have ADHD, and they use them to like help them study for university, for example. That's a very bad idea because they can be addictive, especially if you don't have ADHD. And if you don't have ADHD, they'll probably make you very anxious and like shaky. And then, there's all the other problems I mentioned as well with appetite suppression and so much. Also, I had to be really careful taking these. I had doctors with me. They were checking my blood pressure and my heart rate and my weight every week. And we started on a low dose and gradually moved up. So that whole process is called titration. And it really is, it's a long process. I had to, write to them every week and tell them how I felt, how things were going. So, I don't know. I think it's a bit stupid to take it for like trying to study better. But the whole thing of study drugs, that's like a whole other issue that I'm not really going to get into in this video. One of the main issues with this medication isn't actually the medication itself. It's that it's really hard to get it, but it can really help so much, right? Like when I think, God, if I had had this medication in university, I probably would have had a completely different experience. But in order to get this medication, you need to have an official diagnosis of ADHD. And in the UK, for example, you can get a diagnosis on the National Health Service, which is the free state healthcare that everyone is entitled to, everyone can get. But the waiting lists are very long. In my local area, I would have had to wait 5 years to get a diagnosis. So instead, I went private, and of course going private is very expensive, and there was the possibility that I paid for an assessment and I wouldn't get a diagnosis, right? And then I had to pay for the medication for several months and for the titration process with this private clinic. I have just got, literally yesterday, I just got a shared care agreement. What that means is the private clinic has agreed to work with my NHS doctor, my local doctor, and the NHS will now pay for the medication, which is fantastic because it saves me a lot of money. It can be really hard to get any ADHD medication as an adult in many parts of the world. In some countries, they only give it to children because there's this belief that only children suffer from ADHD and that adults just have to deal with it and it's something that goes away. People kind of think this about autism as well. People only want to think about autistic children and children with ADHD, but there's lots of adults as well. The specific medication I'm on, Elvanse, is also illegal in many countries, even in Europe. So for example, when I went to Hamburg last week, I had to pay the private clinic to write a letter to say that I was allowed to bring the medication into the country because they don't want people bringing in these meds and selling them to university students, for example. So that's like the main medication I'm on. I did mention PrEP as well. PrEP doesn't have many side effects, or at least it doesn't for most people. I did find when I started on it, it gave me some stomach pain, but that went away after like a week. And because I take it daily now, it's not a problem. PrEP I can get for free in the UK, and actually I have very few complaints about that. It's been pretty easy to get. So I go every 3 months to a sexual health clinic to get a test, basically to get, tested for any sexually transmitted infections. This is something everyone should do, whether you're straight or gay or bi or whatever. If you are having sex regularly, you should get tested every 3 months. Even if you are in a relationship and your partner says that they are not having sex with anyone else, you should still get tested because they might be lying to you. And you don't want to be in a relationship for 5 years and then find out that that person gave you a sexually transmitted infection. Anyway, that's a separate issue. But basically, through the sexual health clinic, I can get PrEP for free. And that's the case in quite a few places now. Obviously, there is still a lot of discrimination against gay people and people with HIV in many parts of the world, but it has been shown by studies that when countries give free PrEP, when it's easy to access PrEP and give it for free, the infection rates of HIV go down a lot. So I think it's a fantastic thing. It's obviously not a cure for HIV, and I think there's still work to be done, but I'm really happy it exists. In the past, I have tried other medication. If you've been following the podcast for a long time, or you've just seen older YouTube videos, you'll probably know that I was transitioning. I was transitioning from male to female. So what that means was I was on a testosterone blocker, which was an injection, which reduced, it basically stopped my body from producing testosterone. And then I took estrogen, which is a pill, just like a hormone pill. And then, when was it? Over a year ago, let's say, I decided to detransition. I decided to transition back to male. So I stopped taking those medications. For most of the time I was taking them, I was also on an antidepressant called Mirtazapine. Mirtazapine is quite a weak kind of antidepressant, and I was on a low dose. The kind of antidepressant that most people think of is SSRIs. SSRIs are really quite strong, and you have to take them for sometimes for a month before they actually start being effective, and they can have quite bad side effects. I do think the Mirtazapine was a mistake. I really started taking it when I was in a very bad place after university, and it helped me sleep, which was the main thing I liked about it, and it also reduced my sex drive. And because it reduced my sex drive, it kind of stopped me from noticing that the hormones weren't what I wanted, basically. And it was really when I stopped taking Mirtazapine that I realized, I need to detransition, although that realization took a long time. So I don't know. I think it's good that people can often access antidepressants, and certainly it's easier to access antidepressants than many other kinds of medication. But it's also frustrating because really what I needed was not antidepressants. I, needed something like this ADHD medication. And the depression I experienced wasn't something inherent to me. I was experiencing depression because of specific circumstances in my life. And a lot of that was because it was really hard living, being autistic and ADHD, and, not knowing how to look after myself, and being in a society where it's very hard to be those things. So generally, I think that healthcare should be free or at least cheap, and it should be accessible. One of the ways of making it more accessible is to use an informed consent model. So informed consent is basically the idea that if you go to your doctor and you say, for example, Mr. Doctor or Mrs. Doctor, I am pretty sure that I am transgender. I've thought about it a lot. I've done a lot of research. I've, tried certain things and it's made me feel good. I would like to try hormone therapy and see if it's right for me. And in that case, your doctor would say, great, we can try it and see how things go. And if it doesn't work, you can always, maybe talk to a gender therapist or stop taking it. Unfortunately, that is not the model that most healthcare in the UK takes. The idea in the UK is still very much the doctor knows everything and the patient is just there to kind of tell them what their symptoms are, and then the doctor will decide, this is what you have, this is your diagnosis. And for conditions such as, if you're transgender or you're ADHD or you're autistic, it can be really hard to get a diagnosis this way because it's very hard to diagnose those conditions. And honestly, with these specific cases, it's not an illness, right? It's not a disease. It's not like there's something wrong with my brain. It's that I have a specific kind of brain that in this society, doesn't fit well, and that causes a lot of problems. So ideally, I'd love to be able to just go to my doctor and talk about this stuff and, try out this medication. Now with hormones for gender transition, it's a lot easier because, the side effects aren't potentially so bad. With this ADHD medication, I can see the argument that, if they gave it out more freely, people could just sell it and people can use it as study drugs, and there's the risk of addiction and things like that. So it is a bit more complicated, but certainly it should be easier than it is now. It's also strange because it's really hard for adults to get ADHD medication, but it's easier for kids. And, probably by this point you've thought about America, because there was this kind of scandal, I guess, in America, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, where, they were saying, oh, they're giving ADHD medication to too many children. I do think ADHD medication should not be given to young children because I don't really know what the research shows, but I think it can, affect the way your brain develops. And also at that young age, it's fine to have lots of energy. I don't think there's a problem with that. And really the problem is the school system. Because, if I think back on my time in school, which, I struggled, even if I had had ADHD medication, I probably still would have been really tired and stressed. So I think the problem is more the school system because it's just so difficult for people with ADHD, rather than, using medication to try and make children fit into this system. Because at the end of the day, even with all my pills and skills, I still don't want to go and do, a normal job, a 9 to 5. I would still find that really, really, really difficult. So I guess my conclusion is, with the medications I've specifically discussed, so, ADHD medication and antidepressants, let's say, I think they're a necessary evil. I think, I can completely understand people who don't want to take them. And certainly I don't know if I want to be on this medication for the rest of my life. But I think, until we live in a better world where it's easier to, have ADHD, or, there's more support for depressed people and it's not seen as this shameful thing. I think until that happens, it's a good thing, right? And I think everyone deserves to make that decision themselves, whether they want to try it. Obviously, in the past, certain medication and treatments have been used coercively, as in people didn't have a choice, they were forced. They were used coercively to control people who were crazy or mad or, sick in the head, right? I read a really good book recently, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. The Bell Jar is like a classic novel, and it's really about a woman who's struggling with this thing of being mad, basically, and then she gets forced into these psychiatric institutions and, you know, all of these coercive treatments, and it's quite horrible in many ways. So yeah, I'm proud of the fact that I'm autistic and I'm ADHD, and I'm happy I have this medication, but it doesn't define me and it doesn't change who I am as a person. I'm still the same person, you know? Also, most people drink coffee, they drink tea, they drink alcohol, they eat chocolate, you know, these are all mind-altering substances, especially coffee. Coffee actually does have quite a big effect on how your brain works. Just it's so normalized in society that we don't think about it that much. So, you know, to a certain degree, almost all of us are on some kind of medication, really. But that's a bit of a deep topic. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let me know if you're on any drugs or pills in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this video. And I'll see you next month for the next video. Bye.